In this episode of Occult Unmasked, we will explore an episode of Westworld where chaos magic is taking place, and I will also cover a few other subjects involving the same thing, Westworld. It's a great show. It has a budget of $100 million. The illustrious Anthony Hopkins plays Dr. Robert Ford, co-founder of this theme park, which was imagined up by Michael Crichton, the same guy who came up with the dinosaur theme park, Jurassic Park. I did see the original 70s movie Westworld, and it gives you some perspective on some ideas of where the writers came from, so it doesn't spoil the TV show at all, but it gives you a little insight into the history, if you will. Let's say the modern version of Westworld is kind of like an evolved 40 years later, an evolution of the archaic robots in the original Westworld movie. The sequel to the Westworld movie is a movie called Future World. Westworld and Future World are connected in a place called Delos. It's a place for only rich people because it costs a lot per day. In the original movie Westworld, like $1,000 a day or something like that. In the show, they say it's close to $30,000 to $40,000 a day, something like that. So that's crazy expensive. Obviously, it's a make-believe fantasy world, but something that is not fantasy are the locations they use to shoot this show. Like any TV show or movie, they look for a nice location that looks really good for the setting of the scene and what's going on. So renting actual buildings happens all the time, but in this case, the creators of Westworld decided to rent out, for shooting purposes, a crypt, an actual mausoleum with actual dead bodies and cremated remains of humans inside. First of all, it took place near Hollywood, so it's not so far away from Los Angeles, making it more commonplace, I suppose, but beware. If you don't want to have no access to your loved one's grave, maybe don't bury them in a mausoleum that rents itself out to any Hollywood people that will throw cash at them, because this is a big problem. Let's take a look at the first scene. I can't show too much because, like Eyes Wide Shut, there's a lot of nudity. I say there's even more nudity in Westworld than Game of Thrones, but HBO has the freedom to show nudity, which is why they do it, just because they can. They try their best not to be too explicit, but this is clearly the most explicit episode of Westworld ever. And what does Hollywood think of this? Filming a scene with a bunch of naked people in a mausoleum with a bunch of dead bodies and remains of dead people stored away in the walls like a catacomb above ground, a really nice marble. It's obviously an expensive crypt. It's not a cheap one, yet they rented it out for the filming of this episode. It is episode 5 if you want to search it out. I can't show the explicit scenes, but Hollywood seems to be giving it the A-OK thumbs up, as the Hollywood Reporter called it inside Westworld's epic orgy scene. You know, they wouldn't have called it epic unless they are saying it was great, right? So that's a little odd. They would call it epic. Even the actors who participated in the actual scenes with all these naked people, the girl, for example, her name in real life is Evan Rachel Wood. She plays the robot named Dolores Abernathy. The actress that plays that robot, she felt a bit uncomfortable, but she doesn't want to be unprofessional, so obviously she's not going to be too opposed to it. They asked Evan Rachel Wood, "What was your experience shooting the scenes at the sex party in Pariah?" Her response, It was so crazy. It was one of the craziest days of shooting I've ever had in my entire life. I just kept having to go into a corner, put my earphones on, and try to zone out, because I also had to sit there and not really react to what I was seeing. And it was, people were painted gold and red, and there were orgies, and we had no warning. We just walked on set, and there it was. Laughs. Jimmy Simpson and I just kind of clung to each other. So, from her perspective, it was kind of freaky. But just think if you're one of the extras, getting paid very low amount. But the worst thing about being an extra isn't the low wages, it's how long you have to be on set, especially painted in gold or red. Some of those people probably stood there for 12 hours straight, with a break here and there, but really long hours, 4 extras. Wow, it must have been horrible doing that. But let's talk about the chaos magic aspect of this episode, episode 5 of Westworld Season 1. So they're in a mausoleum with dead bodies, and these actual dead humans can't, in any way, shape, or form, oppose of the shooting of many naked people having an orgy or simulating an orgy. Some of it looks very realistic, definitely naked extras all over the place. And that is a form of chaos magic. Whether you're religious or not, or believe in chaos magic or not, disrespecting the resting place of the dead is not something you should really ever do. If kids get drunk and hang out in the graveyard, that's one thing, but staging an orgy inside of a mausoleum where a lot of human remains are buried, those dead people can't say don't do this. They can't oppose it. They can't really do anything. These are encased in marble in the walls, but nevertheless, it's no different than an orgy scene being on top of a graveyard, on top of tombstones. And the dead, they can't do anything about it, but chaos magic is taking place, whether the directors of this Westworld episode know it or not. Let's just go through a few scenes. For those that don't know what chaos magic is, it's extremely disrespecting something on purpose for a magical effect. The directors of this episode, do they know that they are doing this for a magical effect? I believe to a certain extent they do know. They're trying to get an Eyes Wide Shut Stanley Kubrick type genius effect. But Kubrick didn't ever go to this extreme. Kubrick did, to a certain extent, show us chaos magic by using the Bhagavad Gita Indian verse in a context where it shouldn't have been played. But I believe he was showing the evil societies and what they practice and what they do. He rented a mansion. He didn't rent a mausoleum. See, it's a huge difference. Let's go scene by scene and see what's going on. We have the party. We have Dolores, the robot. We have 2 humans, which are vacationing here in Westworld. They came across this secret city, which is like an orgy city, basically. And they found the headquarters of Orgy Town. And here's an old robot warrior. He's like a Confederate type character that really just likes killing. He's been programmed to like to kill. He probably hasn't been programmed for orgies, so he just sits back and smokes a cigar and drinks some alcohol, and he makes a comment that war is more fulfilling than sex, basically. And the humans kind of disagree with him, but it's an interesting context to have this guy here. And here's the bad human pointing at the fuddy-duddies, the robot, and the guy who really wants to be loyal to the robot lady. He kind of wants her as a robot girlfriend. I guess he's going a little crazy, but he wants to be the knight in shining armor for this robot lady. Here's Dolores, kind of worried that these two are picking a fight with each other. They know each other outside of Westworld. It is a guy who's engaged to the dark-haired guy guy's sister, and he is taking his brother-in-law on this lavish $40,000 a day Westworld vacation. They both work in the same extremely high-paying company, high-paying positions. He's basically saying, you don't know what you're doing. You're a wimp. Just kill and have an orgy and kill some more and have more orgies. What's wrong with that? That's what Westworld is all about. But he puts him against the wall and is like, you know what? That's not what it's about to me. And that's the gist of the conversation. So Dolores, she gets freaked out, probably because of the orgy / fight that those two just had. She's been programmed to be a Little House on the Prairie Western girl that's really nice, and she's loyal to her robot boyfriend and whatnot to a certain extent until she met this other guy. But she's walking down the hallway, and it really reminds me of the scene in The Shining where the ghost man in the bear suit is caught with the ghost guest in the tuxedo. Freaky scene when Wendy Torrance sees this for the first time. She has the Shining ability, and Dolores is freaked out by what she sees, but she keeps walking. She sees even more orgies, more freaky scenes, very reminiscent of Tom Cruise's character in Eyes Wide Shut, who sees a lot of freaky rooms in the mansion party. Do these mansion parties take place? Westworld is recreating it for fun, but I guarantee there are lavish parties like this in real life, but I'm not going to cover that. I've never been invited to one, but we all know Cat Williams talked about it, and he was invited to one. He claims it's the reason he may or may not have been torn down, but he's building his way back up into there's a mythos of a Hollywood Illuminati, and perhaps they are somewhat behind the direction of this episode, if they exist, which I do believe to a certain extent they consider themselves illuminated. So Dolores runs into a room. She sees a fortune teller, and these illuminated Hollywood people, a lot of them are atheists, but at the same time, a lot of them believe in fortune tellers and New Age beliefs like that, which you'd think would be a contradiction, you think would be hypocritical, but they still believe in it. And so Dolores sees this weird fortune teller. She sits down, there's skulls all over the place. She grabs a card from the tarot reader, and of course it's a tarot deck designed just for the show with the maze. The maze is the big mystery of the show, so even I have no idea what the secret mystery is. They're going to reveal it, just like the show Lost revealed their mysteries, except hopefully it's written a little bit better than Lost. She doesn't know what's going on. Then she sees that the witch is her, and she freaks out a little bit. The witch tells her she's unraveling. She looks at her arm, and she pulls a string. It's really a dreamlike state. It's not real. She's a robot on top of that, but she looks down and it's gone, and the fortune teller is gone. So she runs away, freaked out. She's going a little bit crazy. But as you can see right here, that is the wall of the mausoleum, and you can see right there you could see on the wall right there 7 areas where human remains are actually stored in real life, and then you can see 2 in the background. And Dolores runs out, and that's where I'm going to stop. But chaos magic actually took place. Now, if the whole scene was her just running down the hall, that's not really chaos magic. The chaos magic involves the explicit scenes of orgies taking place. Let's say the relatives would be opposed to such a scene taking place right next to their grandma's crypt stone where she's buried. They can't do anything about it. It's an extreme disrespect on purpose for a magical effect, or an effect to get a reaction. I'm not going to react too harshly. I mean, I'm still a fan of Westworld, but to make the comparison, you don't walk into a graveyard and you don't disrespect it, whether it's a relative of yours or not. I see a graveyard, I don't disrespect it. I don't think dead people hang out at graveyards particularly. I think they're in an ascended dimension. The 6th, the 7th, the 8th, 9th, 10th. I think people, the ghosts of humans, humans rise up and go into a higher dimension, and they are at peace to a certain extent, and they are resting to a certain extent, and I don't think they are hanging out at the graveyard where their physical body is buried, but perhaps if a loved one comes to visit and puts roses on the grave, maybe they do see and look down through the dimensional windows, and they do perhaps see their relatives paying them the respect, and they are grateful of that. And perhaps when someone films an orgy scene with a bunch of naked people simulating sex on your grave, on top of your tombstone, perhaps you look down and you're a little bit furious. Or perhaps dead people literally have no drama in their life and they don't even think about worldly things, but still it is chaos magic. Another example of chaos magic concerning graves would be perhaps the catacombs in France. There's a famous gigantic catacomb system, and they did use human bones, skulls, and all of the bones for architecture in medieval times. And it wasn't considered disrespectful. They actually needed it to build. They needed it as a means to complete the catacombs, to complete this area underground. It definitely looks like the underworld in real life, but a lot of these people are monks and nuns, and they would be honored to be buried here. They do have it open for tourists. That might be a little bit disrespectful, but it's such an oddity, you can see why they do have it open for tourism. As long as you're respectful, I don't see too much wrong with that, but here is an example of chaos magic in my opinion. So there's a company called Airbnb, I guess Air Bed and Breakfast. I've never heard of them until I searched for the Paris catacombs, and I came across this. Halloween night, spend the night in the Paris catacombs. On us. So it was a contest. They didn't charge for it, but it doesn't really matter. Welcoming people and having a bed to sleep in, and obviously have it with roses and a wonderful meal with a table set up and even a vanity right next to thousands of dead people's remains. How romantic is that? Candlelight, skulls everywhere, actual dead people. And these dead people are like monks and nuns. I'm not Catholic, but I can see a lot of problems with this. It is chaos magic to a certain extent. Let's say you do it in front of a bunch of skulls. That's freaky. Not my idea of a good time. I think Airbnb made a big mistake, but yikes. That would be a freaky time. I would not want to spend the night in the Paris catacombs. You know, off the top of my head, I can think of a famous myth, and it could be true. I can't prove it, and it's very unprovable, so I'm not going to even say that it's real or true. But Nostradamus, the famous prognosticator, the guy who could see into the future, whether he could or not, he wrote a lot of quatrains, a lot of poems, which people claim to have interpreted to have predicted World War II, Hitler, all kinds of things, way ahead of his time. He even predicted the end of the world. We don't know if that is true or not because it's way far ahead. He was someone who practiced black magic. He claims he did it for the greater good, though, and that's what a lot of magician sorcerers say. They claim, because it's for the greater good, like Dr. John Dee, for example. He was a religious man, and he was a black magic practitioner. Well, Nostradamus was as well. Nostradamus was a religious man, but he used a bowl of water and perhaps a few other means. The generic myth of the witch looking in the cauldron and seeing bubbles and then seeing a vision of the future or spying on people, whatever the case may be, Nostradamus supposedly, and this is the myth, was a diviner, used divination, the black magic practice of using a divining demonic entity, divining spirit, because it doesn't work without a divining spirit. I'm not going to preach and talk about the Bible, but I use the Bible as a reference of these times. The Bible talks about false divining spirits, and that is a spirit that can help you see the future, especially using divining methods such as runes, tarot cards, or even looking into a bowl of water, or a black mirror, or a crystal ball, whatever the case may be. Nostradamus looked into this bowl of water and saw many, many things. It was basically a TV screen which a demonic entity showed him the future. Even, they say, his death, his own death. He knew not only the day he would die, but this is all myth, he also knew the day someone would rob his grave. He supposedly put May 1791, or some say it just said 1700 on it, to freak out the person that robbed his grave for the first time. Kind of a cool trick, if you can get away with it. His grave, Nostradamus' grave, has moved around quite a bit. There are different versions of where it is, according to where you look, but here is the myth concerning chaos magic and the backfiring, the almost instant karmic repercussions, as John Lennon would say, instant karma. During the French Revolutionary War, there were some grave robbers that decided to get drunk and rob Nostradamus' grave. There were some myths that there were actually some scrolls or some secrets buried in his coffin with him, or perhaps they did it simply for conquest, war-related reasons, but they dug up Nostradamus' grave, and supposedly one of the soldiers fulfilled a prophecy that even Nostradamus supposedly talked about. According to the legend, Nostradamus said, "If anyone drinks out of my skull, they will gain my powers." They believed if you drink out of the skull of a fortune teller or a prognosticator, that you will receive their powers and also be able to see into the future. So this soldier takes a drink out of Nostradamus' skull, drinks wine out of it, and apparently within 48 hours, a bullet from the war, a stray bullet, struck him, and he died as a consequence of drinking out of Nostradamus' skull. Whether that story is true or not, I don't know, but it is a legend, it is a myth, it's pretty well known, and it's a consequence. Perhaps you will be struck by a stray bullet. I'm not making a threat, I'm just saying karma, to a certain extent, does exist, is real, and let's hope nothing bad happens to anyone ever in the universe, but we all know that's not going to happen. But what we can do is not disrespect the graves of the dead. You know, I'm part Native American, and it is a strong belief in every Native American tribe to greatly respect the dead. And so with that, I would just like to say thank you for watching. This has been John Razimus with Occult Unmasked. Be seeing you.